Well, this morning I want to talk to you about something. And if you were here last Sunday, John mentioned it briefly. But this is the 30th of October, is it not? Which means tomorrow is the 31st of October, which means the next day is November 1st. Does that mean anything to us? Well, I want to talk to you about it today. Because Halloween is developed into a monstrous celebration in the United States. And I just want to talk to you a little bit about the Christian perspective of that and kind of a little bit about the history of it. But I think it's something that we need to consider in this hour when we really are fighting the forces of darkness. You may believe it, you may not believe it, but things that are happening in this nation and in the world are the enemy, the devil. Strife, wars, rumors of wars is bringing us into the end times, isn't it? The end of the end times, actually. The end times started when Jesus went to the cross and was risen, and so we've been living through this period of time. But we're in the end of the end times. There's many biblical things that we've seen happening that are happening now. And so I don't know how close we are. I'm ready. Are you ready? Yeah, I'm ready. I don't want anything stopping me from going with Jesus. Amen. Or you either. And so I think it's something we need to talk about, in that the world being driven by the spirit of the Antichrist, who has not been revealed yet, but the spirit of the Antichrist drives the world, and what we're seeing now is a culture of death. And this is a serious thing in our nation and in the church, in our schools, everywhere. If you're not careful, it will get into your brain. And that's what I'm most concerned about too, is that we get desensitized to certain things, and when we get desensitized to them, we start accepting them in kind of a subtle way. And as we accept them as in a subtle way, they begin to work in us. And I was talking with the ladies yesterday at the ladies' meeting, and we were talking about the things you think on. Are they worth thinking on? Should you be thinking on the things you're thinking on? Because some of those thoughts you need to bury somewhere and get rid of them, because they're not doing you any good. Things that you've heard, things that you think. And the Bible does say that the mind of man is at enmity with God. So when we're born again, we do have the mind of Christ, but we don't all get plugged into it at the same time, right? And so it takes us a while to find the plug-in. And so we're battling not only the forces of darkness, but some of the old man that still wants to rise up in our life. Now, worship of dead ancestors is common throughout the whole world. And I have seen it in many nations because I've been privileged to travel there, and some of it has been astounding. And many times there's food put out for dead ancestors, because Halloween and the All Saints' Day is the day of, so the eve is Halloween Eve, and All Saints' Day is the day. Did you know that the day started in the evening? It's like Sunday starts the week, the day starts in the evening. And so most of us didn't realize that, because the calendar starts at midnight, right? But it starts in the evening and goes through the next day. So the eve. Christmas Eve is, then we have Christmas Day, right? But Christmas Eve is the eve of Christmas Day. It's the day, the beginning of the day. So all over the world, people worship the dead. And they correspond with the dead, they think, at this time. And they send messages to the dead. And they send belongings to them. And you're thinking, how does that happen? I've been in places where I have seen that happen, and it's been astounding. Food is put out in some of the South American countries. The one that I was in was Guatemala. They fly kites with messages written all over them up into the sky, so the dead can read the messages they want to get to them. This has happened in Guatemala City when I was there. And they put palm leaves out on the sidewalks everywhere to keep the demon spirits from going into the shops and the stores and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of things that go on that we may, in our American culture, not recognize, but there is a tremendous attention in the world given to the dead. And this desensitization that happens to us is a really courting of death, and we're seeing it in our city. Part of this comes from the commercialization of Halloween. Halloween is bigger than Christmas, church. Bigger than Christmas. I had to walk into a store the other day to get something they only carried, and when I got in there, I couldn't get past the Halloween. The whole store was Halloween. I went, where's the stationery department? Oh, it's way back there. It used to be up front. It's all Halloween. I was like, you don't even do this for Christmas. So we need to consider these things because this is important to us as the church. It hammers at us year after year, day after day. In fact, in my life, it started with horror films. And you know who made them? Satan. Through Walt Disney.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it started a long time ago because, I've been around a while. So Disney, Disneyland, the expansion of the occult and the exaltation of horror movies and scary things and all of this was a part, I think, of the enemy's plan to bring society into this position that they're in now, where they are, what would we say, living in such fear and feeling so out of control that there's nothing that they know to do but to take drugs, self-medicate, go into things of the occult, sorcery, and a lot of delusional thinking. And I think we need to realize that this is what's going on in our society. It's not just in other countries now, it's here. And it's been here for a long time. But every Halloween, if I get a chance, I like to talk about it because I think it helps us to solidify what we do in our homes and with our children. I mean, our children today have not been taught to cope with reality. Not through the schools, the breakdown of the family. They live kind of in a fantasy world. I mean, everything is movies and watching movies and living the life of some star or this, that, and the other thing. So they really have not been equipped to become part of society and live a life that would be successful. And without the ability to think critically, what to think critically means is that thinking critically would be if there's a fire and you don't stick your hand in the fire because you know that if you stick your hand in the fire, you're going to burn yourself. That's critical thinking, right? If you're on a cruise ship in the middle of the ocean, you don't jump off and go for a swim. That's critical thinking. They will drive off and leave you. But unfortunately, the delusionary process that a lot of our youth are being raised in through school and movies and pictures and things are all unrealistic, and they're not able to think about those things, and so they just do things that are going to cause their death. And I think that's something we need to be very much aware of. There's pills for everything. No vision, no goals, just take another pill. And I'm not against medication, but I'm just saying pharmakeia is sorcery. And the use of that to substitute for reality, which is a problem in society because the doctors are working to try and cure this too, to stop it. But there's got to be a pill to make you feel better. You just don't change what you're doing to make you feel better. You just take another pill, right? Continue with your bad behavior. And the increase of suicide. That's a serious problem. And it's a demon spirit that's causing that. And what does Halloween do? Glorifies death. Glorifies death. And I mean, we need our youth, we need, even as adults, it's not too late to learn how to live. Life. God came to give us life and life abundantly, right? And we're not to court death all the time with wearing only black and black everything and skulls. I walked through a store the other day, and I don't do much walking in stores. It was the same store I was went in for the Halloween stuff. And there was shirts with sequined skulls all over them. I thought, this is real classy. Now, you couldn't put a cross on a shirt and sell it in that store, but you can sell the skulls, right? It's the skulls. What are skulls? They represent what? Death and decomposition. I mean, just believe me, we're being desensitized to it. People have luggage with skulls on it, shoes with skulls on it, knives, all of these things. Knives, I'm sorry, not knives, knives. But it's all bringing us to the point of this glorification of death. When you're still alive, you're supposed to live life. And let's read Colossians 2, 13 through 15. This is what the Bible says to us. And you who were dead in trespasses and in the uncircumcision of your flesh, your sensuality, your sinful carnal nature, that's who you were before you received Jesus Christ, God brought to life together with Christ, having freely forgiven us all of our transgressions. He came to give us life. Verse 14 says, having canceled and blotted out and wiped away the handwriting, the note, the bond with its legal decrees and demands, which was in force and stood against us, hostile to us. This note, with its regulations and decrees and demands, he set aside and cleared completely out of our way by nailing it to his cross. God disarmed the principalities and the powers that were raged against us and made a bold display and public example of them by triumphing over them in him, in Jesus, and in it, the cross. We have been, as Christians, delivered out of this type of a thing. We live life. We have been given life eternal. We received Christ. We're eternal beings. We have life. We should not be courting death. We should not be worshiping at the font of the culture of death or the devil. And I think this is something we need to really understand. And if I step on your toes this morning, I will not apologize, actually, because you need a little shock treatment if you don't know these things. And I think it's something you should know. I came out of the occult. I was demon-possessed when I got born again. I can tell you how subtle it happens and how when you don't know better, you can get caught into it. And so it's something that we need to consider. Early pagan Celtic celebrations were to court death and to worship death. And the Celts were in Europe and Ireland, Norway, Sweden, that area, and they moved into the European nations when they migrated. And so Samhain, which is the name, Samhain, was their celebration on October 1st, and its eve was October 31st. The time when the celebrating annually commenced, season when light left, and when the darkness came. Now, you know, the closer you get to the equators, to the poles, then the time changes. And so sometimes in the North Pole and the South Pole, there's only darkness and only day. There's no change of day and night, the way the world rotates. I don't have to do a geography lesson, but anyway, basically. So when the light left and the darkness ruled, with longer nights and less daylight, which is what the time change is trying to avoid. So we change our time here in the United States so we can control time, whether it gets dark and when it doesn't get dark. But you know what? It always gets dark at the same time. The time is supposed to get dark. I don't care if you call it 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock. It still gets dark. What time is it? It's dark, right? Basically, when I was a kid, mothers did not say, you just be home by 4:30. They said, be home before dark. Just be home before dark. When the street lights come on, you come home. It was like, we were home before dark. We didn't ask, is that 5:05? Oh, I'm just 5 minutes late. No, it was before dark. You had to be there before dark. And so this darkness and light became deified or made gods with these people. And so they used this Samhain celebration to explain the change in a superstitious type of way from fall to winter, or from the falling of the leaves, from coming out of summer when you had bountiful food, the falling of the leaves, everything's getting barren, and then winter when the snows came and everything seemed to be dead and frozen. And so they took this festival and they did it in the honor of the Lord of the Dead. And that was a druid deity. We know that is Satan. This particular deity of the Celts became the Grim Reaper. Have you ever heard of that? The Grim Reaper, one that comes to kill and to steal souls, people. And on this night, pagan Celts believed that the two worlds, the physical world and the spirit world, drew closest together, and that ghosts and the apparitions of the dead could roam about on the physical plane. Now, this is what happened when I was talking about things happening in South America in certain countries. I'm not saying they all did this, but in the place I was, they did it with the flying of the kites to communicate with the dead and talk to them because the time was different. And so we can see this all still applying through the culture of the world. And this was, for the Celts, this was a magical time of lighting bonfires. And they had a spiritual significance behind that. And they would light the bonfires and they would keep them burning, and then they would put them out and then relight them at the end of the year. So that would signify the end of the year and then the coming of the next year. And so the Druids believed that on the eve of the festival of Samhain, the Lord of the Dead, that they called together the wicked spirits that within the last 12 months had been condemned to inhabit the bodies of animals. And literal human sacrifices were offered on this night to the spirits of the dead as they supposedly visited their earthly haunts and their friends. Trick or treat. So, we're looking at, there's nothing about Halloween that doesn't speak of death. I really want you to understand that. And it's always been that way from the time, and they made it Halloween, was with Hallowed Eve, when the Catholic Church stepped into it. And the Catholic Church didn't like what they were doing, so they decided to make it a different kind of a holiday, and so they called the first All Saints' Day. So they celebrated the dead saints. I don't know what was much difference in that between them celebrating the other dead people, right? But in any event. So we've got like France, Germany, England, Scotland, Ireland, and these people were eventually conquered by the Romans. And a lot of this information comes from the Roman and the Greek writings from about 200 BC and very early records. But the whole point of what I'm saying is the picture was to kill, to human sacrifices, to kill them, to lay curses on places, and to create magical obstacles against people so they would die. Now, should a Christian celebrate Halloween? Oh, when you think about it, now we all want it. You want to celebrate it. You may want to celebrate it, but you know what you're celebrating. And this is what I want to tell you. It's serious. Ephesians 5:8-12 says, "For you were formerly darkness." That means you used to celebrate Halloween. "But now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of the light." That means Why would you worship the devil if you're God's child and you worship God? You can't do both. The fruit of the light consists of all goodness, righteousness, and truth, trying to learn what is pleasing to the Lord, and have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather reprove them. For it is a shame even to speak of those things which are done of them in secret. So right here, the scripture draws a line between light and darkness. And really, God doesn't change the times. Daylight savings time or not. Light and darkness are still the same. Man cannot control what God is doing. It's something we all need to learn, isn't it? So what does it mean to have fellowship? It says we should not have fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but we should rather reprove them. Well, fellowship comes from a Greek word, koinonia, which means commonness. Commonness, like kind. Those who follow the Lord should have no commonness with the unfruitful works of darkness. Those who follow God should have commonness with the light, not with the darkness. So Halloween is filled with darkness. When did they start trick-or-treating? When it gets dark, right? It has to get dark first. All right? So it is filled with darkness, it's wicked, it's evil, and it's what makes Halloween Halloween. And the Bible in 1 Thessalonians 5:22 tells us we should avoid every kind of evil. How could we possibly, knowing that the Bible condemns these practices and ideas of Halloween as anti-Christian, partake of such a day? You're like, oh, Pastor, you're ruining everything. Well, hurry back, you could return your costumes. You know, it's not too late. I mean, there's a truth to it. But it's an interesting thing to consider. Why are we taking part of it? Halloween is a day of worship. Halloween, a holy eve, that's what they're calling a holy day, a holy day. We call it a holiday. Holiday, well, they've even gotten rid of that. We don't have holidays anymore. We have festivals, or we have fall festivals, but we don't have holidays anymore because that means holy days. They want to erase it from our language. All right, so if Halloween is a day of worship of the dead, then who's being worshiped? Satan. Why would we want to participate in worshiping Satan? 2 Corinthians 6:14-16 says, do not be bound together with unbelievers. For what partnerships have righteousness and lawlessness, or what fellowship has light with darkness? And what harmony has Christ with Belial, that's the devil, or what has a believer in common with an unbeliever? Or what agreement has the temple of God with idols? For we are the temple of the living God, just as God said, I will dwell in them and walk in them, and walk among them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Now, I have to tell you, my original pastor, Dr. Bill Sharp, he used to tell us a story. Gilly probably remembers this. And they were all expecting the return of Jesus. And we are still expecting the return of Jesus. He's still alive. And he said, and we were so scared as kids in the church. We were so scared because if we stuck into the movies to see Gene Autry kiss his horse, that's all that happened in those movies. You know, it was the Gene Autry movies, cowboy movies. And he says, we were all scared if Jesus came back, we'd go to hell. That's what they told us. If we went to the movies, we were going to go to hell because Jesus might come back and find us in the movies. Well, I want to tell you, what if Jesus comes back and finds you in your costume on Halloween? I mean, wouldn't that be interesting? I mean, like, what? If you're dressed as a devil, you need to go with the devils, right? You go to the left, you go to the right. I'm trying to keep it light, but I mean, it is honestly, there's really a truth to this. So Halloween is the second most popular holiday next to Christmas. I'd say now it has surpassed Christmas. Now, how can the devil have a day of worship bigger than the birth of God? Think about it. But it's happened slowly, seductively, desensitizing us to where we just go along with it. And that's why we're kind of in the state we're in now, is that a lot of things have just desensitized us, and we don't think about them. That's the way it is. Well, the last statistics I had, over $15 billion are spent on Halloween every year. That's a lot of money, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Over $400 million is spent on pet costumes alone. Pet costumes. I have a pet, but I don't put those costumes on her. And she's a dog. If you have a pet that's a cat, right? Okay. All right, we got it straight. And we put the costumes on them. And more Christians are celebrating Halloween every year and making a bigger and bigger party out of it. And always Halloween will take you into places you don't want to go, and it's going to keep you longer than you want to stay, because you're trafficking with the devil and with demon spirits. And so it's something you have to know, that those things are real. And I will say something about the rest of the world. They have a greater grasp on demonic activity than the deluded people in the United States. We seem to live in a little dream world where we just don't think any of that's really real. That's just superstition, and that's not real. Well, it's real. I want to tell you, it's real. And you will pay the price for it. And I'm not saying God's going to punish you, but I'm saying once the devil gets a hook in you, you just ask some of us, that hook will take you bad places. And I don't know, it's been a good 50 years that I can recall that they began to put razor blades and pins and needles and things in the candies, so you couldn't see that they went in there. And then when the kids ate them, they would pierce them and they would end up in the hospital. Now, this isn't godly behavior, is it? Do you want to expose? We don't want to expose our children to that. Are you kidding? I mean, you've got to understand how demonically inspired this is. It's to kill, to steal, and to destroy. Now they put drugs in there. Now they have drugs in little gummy bears and candies. And what do you give out on Thanksgiving if you celebrate it? Candy, right? You need to be very careful, parents, if you're going to participate in this, that what you get and your kids are eating is not something that's going to take them and kill them. Because this is the status of where we're at today in this culture. The Old Testament is leavened with a multitude of verses which condemn occultism and its practices. And it says to avoid them completely. I read your New Testament. Here's Deuteronomy 18, 9 through 14. This is explicit, covering occultic practices. When you are come into the land which Jehovah your God gives you, you shall not learn to do according to the abominations of those nations. There shall not be found among you he that makes his son or his daughter pass through the fire. That means you offer your children as a sacrifice to the god Moloch, if I can make this plain for you. Are we not offering in our nation? We're the biggest purveyor of this, our children as a sacrifice to a God who loves death in abortion. I'm just asking you things. Those that use divination, auguries. You may not know what that means. Divination is evil practices. When we would minister in the Philippines, they would bring babies in and grown-up people to get prayed for, and they had amulets or auguries or things around them that they had curses put on, and they put them on them, and the babies were dying. You put that stuff on, and we would take it off of them, and the demon would leave them alone. You say, was that real? That is truth. That is truth. I don't know how real it is for you, but you weren't there. But I mean, I've seen it. It says divination, fortune telling, enchanter, sorcerer. Sorcery is pharmakeia, it's a purveyor of drugs, peyote, hallucinogenics, charmer, one who inquires of a spirit, of python or a soothsayer, those who conduct seances, who call up the dead. People go to them. Many people go to them for readings and for direction, even in this hour today. Now this is Old Testament. I'm talking about today also. Or anyone who consults the dead. For everyone that does these things is an abomination to Jehovah. Because of these abominations, Jehovah your God does dispossess them from before you. You shall be perfect with Jehovah your God, for these nations which you shall dispossess hearken unto those who use auguries and that use divination. But as for you, Jehovah your God has not suffered you to do so. One of the strongest words in the Old Testament for wicked actions, besides the word wicked itself, is abomination. And it says these practices are abominable. They are abominable whether they're just for fun or for real. How do you know the difference? That's where delusion comes in. God desired that his people hate such practices and rid the land of those who practice such evils. I'm not advocating that you go out and kill everybody in costume. Please don't misunderstand me, please. But I want you to know that the danger that's going on there for those people, too, they're getting pulled into demonic things, and they may not even realize it. But it does make a mark on children's lives. Exodus 22:18 says, you shall not let a witch live. We don't send them to rehab. He said you don't let a witch live. They were to kill them and liberate the land of the abominable practice of witchcraft and sorcery. And why is that? Because it's worshiping the devil, and it's giving the devil the honor and all of the power that belongs to God. When you give it to God, give it to the devil, that doesn't take it away from God, but it empowers the devil in your eyes. God still has all the power, but you are making the devil bigger in your own eyes and in those who watch you, and you are putting an example out there that is going to lead other people into problem areas. Why do we have so much drug addiction? Why do we have so much suicide? Death? We have a culture of death. It's killing, killing, killing. And we don't even recognize it. That's what's happening as we're being seduced into this type of a thing. Now in Revelation 18:4 it says, come out of her, my people, that you be not partakers of her sins, and you receive not of her plagues. So I don't know that it can't be any plainer, is that Christians should not be playing the games of the world and the devil's holy days. We shouldn't be worshiping at that fountain, because it will lead us into bad places. Halloween is based on fear. You think of fun, of haunted houses and things like that. Well, the Druids were power-hungry sinners who desired to gain control over others for their own purposes quickly. So this is the essence of witchcraft, which means manipulation. In complete contrast, the scriptures replace fear with 2 Timothy 1:7. That says that God has not given us a spirit of fear. Fear drives all bad behavior. Fear. Even in Christians, we can be bound by fear and still say that we believe in God. We have not come to the point where we recognize He didn't give us a spirit of fear. If we have fear that's not of God, we need to get rid of it. He overcame death, hell, and the grave when He went to the cross and was risen. So the fear should be a fear for the Lord. And actually, I think with the heathen, with the sinners, with people that don't know the Lord, that fear is really a fear of God, because He's able to judge and dispose of men in hell. And I think they know it. I think they're quite aware of it. And men are afraid of a God who can do this. They have a spirit of fear, and they are afraid. Afraid. Fear is fear of death. Fear of loss. That's what fear is, when you take it all back to its roots. So we have to recognize if we have fear, then that is not going to be from God. People who are born again, regenerated by the Spirit of God, have a spirit of love, right? Power and sanity. We don't live in the delusionary process. We have sanity. And our spirit of love is obtained as a fruit of the Holy Spirit. And there's really no place to be afraid of God. To reverence Him, to respect Him, and to recognize He has all power is wisdom. But we don't live our days afraid of Him. We live in the blessing of God. The only ones afraid of Him are those who should be having a reason to be afraid of Him. So I want to tell you today, if you have fear, you need to fight against it. You need to bind it and not play with it, because it will come in and drive you. Jesus is a shepherd. He leads His sheep. He doesn't drive them. He leads His sheep. So why would we want to entangle ourselves in any variety of fear at all? Why go to horror movies? Why watch horror things? It's the fear. It's the fear. The fear of death. Somehow it gives us a thrill when we've been scared, because somehow we lived through it. So we feel like so powerful that we overcame that scare, right? It's bizarre, isn't it? It's totally bizarre. But when you think about it, the sting of death has been done away with Jesus Christ. So when people go to haunted houses, and they pay to go there, they jump around in fright and they get all scared, but it kind of gives them a foretaste of hell in a way. And they're scared to die, but they feel exhilarated because they had a brush with death and they survived it. Somehow it gives them immortality in a certain way. But it's the result of a twisted, perverse, fallen soul. Why glorify fear, dying, and death? Why enjoy it? It's part of the curse of Genesis 3, the fall of man, the curse. There was no fear. If you read back in Genesis, you will see there was no fear until man fell. Then they hid themselves and tried to cover themselves. So how much ground should the Christian give to the devil? Is there any room for compromise? I don't think so. Ephesians 4:2 said, give no place to the devil. So the Christian who belongs to God should have a sincere hatred of the devil and everything he represents. Not the people, but the devil. This is where we're fighting. We're fighting the devil. Jesus already overcame him. We should be walking in victory here. And when we walk in victory, we don't play with the enemy. Halloween represents all that the devil loves and propagates against the holiness of God's character. When Christians participate in occult festivals, they're ascribing glory of the Lord, the devil, Sam Ham's God, the God of this world, Satan himself. And the Bible speaks against this. I mean, it really speaks against this in many places. So we can't reclaim it. There's nothing good to reclaim. I mean, we can't make Halloween Christian. If you know what I'm saying? I mean, we can play at making it Christian, and some churches play at making it Christian, but it's not Christian at all. In Ephesians 6, 10 through 12, it says, "Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you might be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, against rulers of darkness and spiritual wickedness in high places." So I don't see any place you can make peace with that. You're going to have to stand against it. Abstain from all appearance of evil. You say, well, you're saying that a lot. Well, I think we need to say it a lot. We need to stop playing games with the devil. Honestly. The scriptures tell us to fight against the enemy. That means we resist the devil. We are not going to participate in it. You say, well, what about that they just ring the doorbell and they want something? Do you have to answer the doorbell? One of the greatest things I ever learned in my life was I didn't have to answer the phone when it rang. Did any of you ever learn that? When your phone rings, you don't have to answer it. I don't hear any amens. Amen. You don't have to. When your text thing goes off, ding, you don't have to look at it. Please don't when you're driving on the freeway. I mean, you can't be controlled by these things. I mean, I'm a person that grew up with none of these things. And I lived. You can all live without them. You need to know that. Because in a sense, some of this stuff is really bondage. My goodness. So we need to not open ourselves up. We don't need to learn the way of the heathen. Jeremiah 10:2 says. And Paul exhorts us in another context. He says, I would that you should not have fellowship with devils. 1 Corinthians 10:20. Why would we want to? Do y'all want to go to dinner with devils? I can tell you some places you could get some. Maybe you all eat there anyway. I don't know. James 4:7 says, submit yourselves to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Resist him. That means don't go his way. Don't answer when he calls. Basically, don't answer when he calls. Why not be true light in a dark world? Why not be different? You know, when we were kids, we were growing up, we all wanted to be different, right? We didn't want to be like our parents. We didn't want to be like them. We didn't want to be like them. We want to be different. So we did a lot of different things. Well, can't you be happy being different and being the light? I mean, the light is a powerful force. If you're the light in the darkness, what happens to dark? It leaves, doesn't it? Yeah, it lights up, right? I mean, there's light in the darkness. And God said that when he spoke, let there be light, then that's what there was. Darkness had to flee. So we need to be sons and daughters of the light. John 12:46, Jesus said, I'm come a light into the world, that whosoever should believe on me should not abide in darkness. So Jesus came that you could be a light. So you receive him and you become the light of the world, like he was the light of the world. John 8:12 says, Jesus spoke to them again. He said, I'm the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have light of life. Light and life. Light and life. Even plants don't grow in the dark. They need light, right? They need sunshine. They need light. John 3:19-21 says, "This is the condemnation, that light has come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil. For everyone that doeth evil hateth the light, neither cometh the light, lest the deeds should be reproved. And he that doeth truth cometh to the light, that his deeds may be made manifest, that they were wrought in God." I mean, there's a lot in the Bible that talks to us about walking in the light, and that God made us light, isn't there? Amen. So turn your lights on, church. Romans 13:12, the night is far spent, the day is at hand. Let us therefore cast off the works of darkness and put on the armor of light. You want to be soldiers of God with light armor and flashing swords. I mean, think about it. You have that power. And we need to stand up and be the light, church. We've been chosen by God. We're a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people. How many peculiar people are here? Pretty peculiar, yeah. And you should go forth, show forth the praises of him who have called you out of darkness into his marvelous light, in which in time past were not a people, but now are the people of God. We're now the people of God. We need to think about it. Let's just think about it as we go through the next week. And let's be on our guard. Let's put on the armor of light. Let's not be succumbing to the demands. Now it's a demand that everyone should bow down and worship the devil on Halloween and feed and to do this and do that. And I'm telling you, church, it's cooperating with the forces of darkness. And you say, well, what's wrong with giving somebody candy? There's nothing. Do it in the store, you know. Would you like a piece of candy? If you want to give kids candy, they'd love it in the store, right? I'm sure and ask their mothers. But I'm telling you what, I mean, why do it in the context of giving it on a threat to worship the devil? Now, I know most people don't understand they're doing it, but that doesn't change the context of what's happening. And we have to realize that. We can't set aside a day to worship witches and demons. It's a day of fasting and praying curses on you, on the church of Jesus Christ and God's people. Think about it. It's like financing what's destroying you. Basically, you're not of the darkness. You are of the light. And that's what I want to encourage you with today. I want to make you aware of the problems. I want to make you aware of the end result of that in our culture. Suicide, drug addiction, gender fluidity, all kinds of strange things, wearing costumes. If we don't like who we are, we just put on a costume, and boys can be girls and girls can be boys. And now life is not a play. Life is reality. And so please walk in the light while you still have the light. Amen? Because what if Jesus comes back on Halloween? Oh my gosh. Where will he find us? Praise God. Hallelujah.